Hi, I'm Dini. Welcome to week 9. This week we're going to be looking at hooks and cliffhangers, so either end of a story. First of all, the hook. A narrative hook is a writing technique in the opening of a story that literally hooks the reader in so that they feel compelled to keep on reading. The length of this hook, this opening, can be anything from the first few paragraphs of a short story to the first few pages of a novel. Ideally, it would happen in the first sentence and to grab the reader immediately, but it doesn't have to. You'll find in books for children, often it is the very first sentence that grabs them in because they haven't got quite so much attention span. But in older books, you will find that the opening is much slower and it takes much longer to actually get to the hook. More modern books, you find the hook a lot quicker. The purpose of the hook is to get your reader to ask who, what, or why as quickly as possible, and then keep reading in order to answer that question. Remember, your reader has an awful lot of distractions. Social media is your biggest rival. You could begin your story with a pivotal moment, having an unusual situation, serious conflict, or dread. So, I'm going to give you a quick hook exercise, but I'll give you a couple of examples first. I want you to take a look at a variety of books and see if you can find the hook that's there and rate how effective it is for you personally. Perhaps visit a bookshop and have a browse through. Choose a selection of different types of books, different genres, to see how quickly the hook is set. Different sorts of genre have the hook set in a slightly either faster or shorter. For example, a thriller might have the hook immediately to grab you in, whereas a historical novel might take a little longer to tell you more information about it. That's to do with the sort of people who read those books. That's what they expect. Remember, a hook isn't a hook for everyone. For some of your audience, it might be the very thing that turns them off. So, for example, a big explosion might not pull you in. I'm going to read a couple of hooks from 3 different books that I've got so you can see what a hook is. The first one I'm reading from my book Freen, and the very first bit is: Millicent Davy pulled her new cloche hat over her mess of curly hair as she walked down the garden path and narrowly missed crashing into the men from the newspapers huddling outside her garden gate. She could tell they had been there for a while by the quantity of cigarette butts littering the ground beneath her feet. Boy, would her mother be mad. She regretted the lack of a rim on her new hat and instead put her head down and marched right past them, ignoring camera flashes and the persistent questioning voices. The hope there is that the reader will say, why are there cameramen outside her house? Why are there newspapermen there? What's she done? What's going on? That's what the hook is there. Another story. This one has a hook that's almost immediate. This is by Ali Carter. It's a Gallagher Girls book, which they're a great series. I suppose a lot of teenage girls feel invisible sometimes, like they just disappear. Well, that's me, Cammy, the chameleon. But I'm luckier than most. At my school, that's considered cool. I go to a school for spies. So that immediately draws you in. You want to know more about her. What's a girl doing at a spy school? It's really interesting. And another book, again, this is a children's book because children's books have the hooks more obvious and more immediate, so they're quite good examples. This is Purple Mist by my friend Heather Flood. My name is Anique Sheldon. I considered myself to be an ordinary schoolgirl until incredible things began to happen and my worst nightmares became true. So immediately you're wondering, what incredible things started to happen? What were her worst nightmares that came true? So have a look at lots of different books and see if you can find those hooks. See how long they take to happen as well. Is it the first sentence or is it a couple of pages in? So when you're writing your hook, you need to think about who is your audience going to be. The style of your hook will depend on the type of person likely to be interested in your genre of writing. For example, a bloody body at the bottom of the stairs probably won't entice someone who wants to read chick lit, for example. You need to say, what is the purpose of your opening? Are you giving clues to your readers? Is it a key piece of information? Are you presenting a reason for what comes next? Are you jumping straight into a piece of action that will get the reader's heart racing and compel them to keep reading? That's quite typical of a thriller. Perhaps you are putting your readers into a world that will fascinate and intrigue them, like in a fantasy story. Or maybe you'll use unusual terminology, medical or scientific or otherworldly, that will pique the reader's interest and keep them reading. Whatever the hook, you need to understand your reason for using that particular piece of narrative in order to be able to use it really effectively. So here's a second hook exercise. I'm going to get you writing now. What I want you to do is to create the opening paragraph or couple of paragraphs for a short story in at least 3 of the following genres. I'll read them out in a moment. Remember to use different techniques and language appropriate to that genre. So perhaps look at books in that genre to pick up the style of writing from them. Now, when you've done that, test your hook paragraphs on someone else. Read them out loud. I know it can be a bit scary reading or writing to other people, but have a go. Find someone you trust and ask them which ones would make them want to read the whole story, which ones hook them in. So the different genres that I've got are romance, thriller, fantasy adventure, comedy, science fiction, teen angst story, fairy story, a story for a younger child, gothic, a ghost story and a western. So there's lots to choose from, but try 3 of them. Try maybe one that you're familiar with, and maybe try another couple that you're not so familiar with. Give it a go, and as always, I'd love to see what you've written. You can post any of your exercises in the comments of the blog post that goes with this. The notes about that are underneath the video information. Okay, so this time we're looking at the cliffhanger. So a cliffhanger is an unfinished, dramatic or suspenseful situation that leaves the reader on a knife's edge, wondering what's going to happen next. The purpose of the cliffhanger is to compel your reader to turn to the next chapter or to want to come back to your story if they've put it down. They're employed at the end of a chapter, and if a book has a sequel, it can be used at the end of the book to get them to read the next book. It's a little bit like when you watch a soap opera on television. It always ends on a cliffhanger. It always ends at something having happened that you need to watch the next episode to carry on with. In a book, it doesn't have to be quite as dramatic as a soap opera. And I do keep rattling on about compelling your reader to keep reading, and that really is of vital importance. Some key points about cliffhangers. Often the protagonist is left in a precarious situation. A cliffhanger is often abrupt, a sharp shock. A cliffhanger need not be a life and death situation though, but it should be something that your reader will care about, something enough that they're going to think, I need to get back to this. Even if they put it down to do something else, they need to get back to it. A cliffhanger can also be a setback, a path that's halted or changed. So it looked like it was all going very well, and then all of a sudden something else happened and stopped them from doing it. So as I've already said, a cliffhanger, especially at the end of a chapter, doesn't have to be dramatic, although often they are. It can be as simple as an unresolved problem or an unanswered question that the reader will look forward to finding out what's happened. So, will she kiss him? What will be in the package? Did she pass the exam? A reader will expect a swift resolution though, or an answer to the cliffhanger in the next chapter. Don't drag it out unnecessarily. Remember, your reader needs to be earning rewards from reading your story by gaining satisfying resolutions as well as unexpected twists. You need to nurture your reader throughout your story. Give and take. Let them be right and sometimes prove them wrong with their plot guesses. Play with their emotions, but ultimately leave them satisfied and eager for more. So, an open ending, leaving a cliffhanger at the very end of a story or a novel. You need to be cautious about ending a story on a cliffhanger because this can actually upset readers who like their tales to be neatly tied up at the end. Some stories end on a sort of semi-cliffhanger in that the reader is left to assume the ending based on the evidence given. It's a literary technique that can work well in paranormal style stories where an air of mystery is expected, and in romance stories where the ending is often left with the characters looking very much like they're going to get together and the author encouraging that assumption whilst leaving the details of the ending open to you to interpret. There are all sorts of ways of leaving a bit of a cliffhanger. In my novel Freen, I've got a cliffhanger which, although the story ended up where you'd expect it to end, there was an extra bit at the end which I put in the epilogue, which is a kind of cliffhanger. I'll read that to you now so you can see. So this is from the epilogue in Freen. Meanwhile, 3 more carriers joined the 630 already set in their 8-month-old holding pattern, 326 light years away from Earth. Had telescopes been able to see real time at that distance, Earth would have been in a state of panic. However, what our telescopes saw was an innocuous void, 326 years in the past. So that obviously helps lead the reader into the sequel. And really it's acceptable to do that if you're writing another story afterwards. If you're not, you've got to be a little bit careful not to upset your reader. So here's your cliffhanger exercise. Cliffhangers can come in lots of different varieties, and I've listed a few different varieties for you to try out. I've got emotional, dire peril, drama, personal discovery, magical event, tense situation, unexpected arrival, and sudden disappearance. What I'd like you to do is to try writing the last paragraph of a chapter for each of those from the list. The list is in my blog post that goes with this video if you want to look at them again. You can create new characters and scenarios each time, or use the same characters in different scenarios. Here's an example, just so you understand what to do with it. I'm going to use an emotional type of cliffhanger. So he stared at her, tears burning in the corners of his eyes. Could he just spit out the words that would change everything for her? So that leaves the reader thinking, what's he going to spit out? What's he going to say? Is he going to say it? It's a small cliffhanger, but it just makes the reader want to find more out about it. What's going to happen next? As always, if you want to post your exercises into the blog post comments, that would be fantastic. I'd love to see what you do with it. This is the end of week 9, and I look forward to seeing you again in week 10.